Today I'm diving into 10 undervalued players set to absolutely explode in 2025. These are guys who are going way too late in fantasy drafts, but they could win you your league. You want upside? You want breakout potential? You want to look smarter than your league mates in the 13th round? Then buckle up, because we're diving deep on these hidden gems. Let's start with a guy who was basically free in drafts and yet was producing like a high-end wide receiver 2 before his injury last year, Darnell Mooney. He was the wide receiver 19 in PPR formats through week 13 last year, despite having to play with the ghost of Kirk Cousins. And that's barely an exaggeration. Cousins was clearly banged up, limited, and eventually got benched, but Mooney was still churning out fantasy production. Then came the foot injury in week 14, and from that point on, he just wasn't the same. His final 3 games were a shell of what we saw earlier, but don't let those games skew the big picture. He played over 90% of the snaps last year and had a 91% route participation. In other words, he's always on the field. And in 2 wide receiver sets, it's just him and Drake London. There is nobody else to take targets here. He's got the deep speed and route running to break a game open. He's not a volume hog, but he's a volatile flex weapon that can win you a matchup with just one 60-yard touchdown. In best ball or redraft, Mooney at wide receiver 47 is the exact kind of pick you want to have on your bench as that upside weekly flex who can win you matchups all on his own with one big play. And then someone please explain how Dak Prescott is going in the 11th round as the 13th QB off the board. That's just complete disrespect. In 2023, this guy threw for 4,500 yards and 36 touchdowns. He's averaged over 20 fantasy points per game in 4 of the last 6 seasons. Now, last year was a bit of a down year, but keep in mind, the Cowboys weren't even that good offensively last year outside of CeeDee Lamb. Early in the season, Dak looked a little bit off, but that's what happens when your wide receiver 2 is Brandon Cooks on one leg and your tight end 1 is just doing cardio. The offense was just stale last year. But now, enter George Pickens, an explosive playmaker who's the perfect complement to CeeDee Lamb and gives Dak a true outside threat. With defenses now having to pick their poison, we should see a major boost in yards per attempt and red zone efficiency. Oh, and by the way, Dallas is ranked 7th and 4th in pass plays per game over the last 2 years. And with no reliable run game and a defense that still isn't very good, they'll need to throw the ball a lot. Dak is the classic, nobody wants to draft this guy, nobody wants this guy on their team QB, but in fantasy, he has the potential to be a top 10 QB that you get with one of your last picks. Now, people are sleeping hard on Christian Kirk this year, and I get it. He's on a new team, and he's got competition from 2 rookie wide receivers. But when you dig a little bit deeper, it's easy to see why he might be one of CJ Stroud's go-to guys this year. Sure, Houston did add 2 rookie wide receivers, but Kirk is projected to take over the slot role, the same role Stefon Diggs had last year. And while Diggs wasn't amazing, don't forget, this guy had nearly 500 yards and 3 touchdowns in just 8 games before his ACL injury. And now Kirk steps into that role with significantly less target competition. The Texans were also 11th in pass plays per game last year. There are plenty of targets to go around behind Nico Collins. And don't forget what this guy did the last time he played a full season. 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns with Jacksonville. He's a great separator, he's productive in space, and he's been a proven fantasy wide receiver 2 when healthy and used right. But at pick 125, wide receiver 60, he's a screaming value this year, especially in your PPR leagues. And then David Njoku is one of the biggest disconnects between actual production and fantasy ADP right now. Here's what he's done the last 3 seasons on a points per game basis. Tight end 10, tight end 7, tight end 4. Consistent, productive, and getting better. And yet, he's the 12th tight end drafted. This makes 0 sense. I assume people are scared off by the Browns QB situation, and sure, it's not great. We're talking Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, maybe Shador, maybe Dylan Gabriel. Gross, let's hope not. But guess what? Njoku has put up numbers even with bad QB play in the previous years. He's athletic, he's a mismatch, and he's still only 28 years old. Not to mention the Browns have been top 10 in pass plays per game in back-to-back years, and last year they were number 1, so the volume is there. As a tight end 12 off the board, he's a set and forget tight end 1 that you can draft with one of your last picks while you build the rest of your roster, and if he puts up a top 10 or another top 5 season, you have a massive advantage over the rest of your league. Okay, I'll admit it. I got burned by Hollywood Brown last year, and probably the year before, and maybe even the year before that. A lot of us did. But you know what? I'm back because this time the price is right. Last year was just a lost season from the start. First preseason game, shoulder injury, out for almost the entire year. But if you look at what happened in those last 5 games when he came back, you'll see he still racked up 28 targets. So the opportunity was there. And while the Chiefs aren't the 50 pass per game juggernaut they once were, they still ranked 7th in pass plays per game last season. And even if he's technically the wide receiver 3 behind Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, this is the best QB in football we're talking about, and Patrick Mahomes spreads the ball around. There's room for Hollywood to have weekly boom games, especially if he's running routes out of the slot or getting deep targets. And this year, the risk is baked in. You're taking him at pick 130, but the ceiling is still there. He could be another one of those wide receivers who's a weekly upside flex that helps you win multiple matchups over the 2025 season. And again, if he busts this year, it's okay because you're picking him so late. And if you're ready to get your fantasy football fix on and start drafting right now, you got to check out UnderdogFantasy.com. They have best ball drafts going on all off season long, including their flagship Best Ball Mania 6, which is going to make multiple millionaires in 2025. Just go to UnderdogFantasy.com, join using promo code ENDGAME, because not only is that going to get you a free pick that you can use among any sport, but also up to $1,000 in bonus cash that you can use to start drafting right now. Now, Jack Bech is one of my favorite rookie sleepers. I've talked about this guy many times. When you look at him at college, he was an above average separator on all but 2 routes last year at TCU, and he had elite success rates across the board. 74% versus man, 79% versus press, and 80% versus zone. And when you look at his college production, last year was by far his best season. He really broke out as a senior because TCU slotted him into that X wide receiver role. That is the exact role he's going to play for the Raiders. And now he's got Geno Smith throwing to him, who's been one of the most accurate QBs in football since resurgence in Seattle. And with Pete Carroll reuniting with Geno Smith and running this offense, Jack Bech is going to slot into that DK Metcalf role. And sure, I like Jakobi Meyers, and yes, Brock Bowers is still going to take plenty of targets here, but this is another late round wide receiver going at pick 135, wide receiver 62, that's going to give you potential weekly upside. We see every year rookies come on, especially down the stretch in fantasy, help win fantasy championships. This year, Jack Bech could be one of those guys. All right, back to another tight end, and Dalton Kincaid didn't quite live up to the off-the-charts preseason hype last year, but the signs were still very encouraging. He was 8th in target share and 7th in target rate among all tight ends. And if you look what happened before his Week 10 knee injury, he was actually the tight end 10 in PPR formats. Now he's heading into year 3 fully healthy and with virtually no competition at pass catcher. And this is the year tight ends typically break out. If Kincaid can put it all together this year and stay healthy, he's got the potential to be a top 5 tight end. But even if he's not and he's just say a top 10 tight end, this is a guy you're drafting with potentially your very last pick. That's the kind of cheat code value that lets you dominate the tight end position in your fantasy league without paying a premium. Now, before going down with a knee injury in Week 12 last year, J.K. Dobbins was looking like an absolute league winner. He was the running back 14, averaging over 15 points per game. Now, this year, he lands in a potentially better spot in Denver, which, by the way, was the #1 run block win rate offensive line last year, according to ESPN, and ranked 11th in rush attempts per game. Sean Payton's offenses are built for a strong ground game. And yes, RJ Harvey is there, and yes, he's got juice, and yes, I like him. But if he struggles early, Dobbins could be the unquestioned lead back behind a top-tier run blocking line. But even if RJ Harvey doesn't struggle, and this is a 50-50, this is still the kind of offense that can support 2 good running backs. This is an explosive, proven running back, and he's now in a great situation. And at pick 143, running back 46, that's a chance you got to take. And you also have to take a chance on Tank Bigsby, who might be the best value breakout running back that nobody wants to talk about. Despite Etienne being the starter, they basically split work last year. Bigsby saw 10.5 carries per game, Etienne 10. But Bigsby was significantly better across the board. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry versus just 4 for Etienne. He was 6th in juke rate versus just 38th for Etienne. He was 20th in evaded tackles versus 33rd by Etienne, and he was 14th in explosive run rating, while Etienne was also just 33rd. And what I love about this situation is we saw last year in Tampa Bay, new head coach Liam Cohen understood what his running backs were good at. He used Bucky Irving in more gap runs and Rachaad White in more outside zone runs. I think that's how he's going to use these guys with Bigsby in that Bucky Irving role. And last year, in games where he got at least 13 carries, he scored double digits every single game and averaged over 17 points. And at pick 155, running back 49, you're potentially getting starting running back protection very late in your fantasy drafts. Let's wrap with a deep sleeper. Cokeheads unite. I'm talking about Jalen Coker. You're getting this guy at pick 203, and he might actually be the second best wide receiver on the Panthers. Now, I've talked a little bit about Xavier Legette, and I still like Xavier Legette, but I think Jalen Coker might be your better option in your redraft leagues. He's going to play primarily out of the slot, but he can also run some of those big boy routes like slants, digs, and outs, which gives him a much better chance for production. Not to mention he had a 70% success rate versus man and press coverage last year and 78% versus zone. And what he does much better than Xavier Legette is contested catches and catching the football. Legette struggled with drops last year, whereas Coker was sure-handed all season long. He's exactly what you want from a reliable slot wide receiver, and Bryce Young showed signs that he might be that guy last year. Coker isn't a splashy pick, but he's consistent. He kind of reminds me of Jakobi Meyers. Very good in full PPR, always undervalued, but someone you can always put in your lineup and feel pretty good about. So there are your 10 undervalued studs for 2025. Dirt cheap now, but could be gold by midseason. But look, you need more gold than that if you're going to dominate in 2025, and we got tons of gold for you in our 2025 video playlist right here.